Hi everybody, this is Maya Good, and I wanted to talk to you about my thoughts on writers groups and some tips to finding and how to get the most out of a writers group. But first, before I get started, I want to apologize for the background noise. I live in a large house that has many people, and unfortunately, recording in my room is really dark. So I'm upstairs in the music room, and there are huge windows, so you can hear all the background noise from outside and up and down the street of New Orleans. So now that that's out of the way, first I want to just mention there are many different types of writing groups, and I'm not a writing teacher. This entire video is just my thoughts on what I found helpful and the types of writing groups that I think are good for people at various stages in their writing development. So the first type of writing group that I ever was involved in was a poetry group, and it was a critique group. And that particular group was led by a writing teacher. And I think that that kind of group is really helpful for someone that is just starting out. You know, if you're just starting out in writing, getting involved in a critique group and that is not led by a teacher and has lots of advanced writers in it, you may find that you may get frustrated or feel demoralized in that type of group. And in addition, you may find that you may feel like you're not able to contribute as much as the other members of the group. So if you're just starting out, at least when I was just starting out, I found that a critique group that is led by a teacher in like a class type of environment or even a coffee shop environment, as long as it's led by someone who is actually a writing teacher, I thought that was really helpful. But even more helpful for me when I was first starting out was a writing group that is just writing. There are groups all over that are called Just Write groups, and there are other groups that are run along the same format. So instead of being a group where you read your work and you tell each other what you think about it, these are groups where you literally just sit and you write for the duration of the time that you're there. I found that very helpful because when I was first starting out, it was hard for me to have a regular writing habit. And checking in each week and being forced to sit down and write for an hour and surrounded by other people that are just writing, even if I didn't get in a lot of words in a particular week, I knew that at the end of that week, I was going to have structured writing time. And for me, before you get into a group that's really heavy into critiquing, developing a little bit of your voice and developing a regular writing habit, I think is really helpful for a couple reasons. One, if you're in a writing group that's all about critiquing stuff and you never have anything to critique, you're going to feel frustrated. And two, I think that sometimes if you do a lot of critiquing early on and you are surrounded by more advanced writers and you haven't developed your voice, you may develop like a hybrid voice of the people that are in that writing group. So doing a lot of writing before you get into a group situation may be beneficial in your actual voice development, and then the group will help you clean it up, will help you learn how to self-edit, will help you learn what your tics are that are negative, will help you learn structure and things like that. So now that I've been writing for a while though, those types of groups aren't so helpful. I find that Just Write groups, I mean, they're fine, they're great, but I enjoy them a lot less than I did when I first started. I think they're great for things like NaNoWriMo, or if you have a huge project and you just need check-in. But I'm at the point in my writing development where I need critique, like high-level critique. And even a classroom environment, I'm not getting enough, because in a regular writing classroom environment, you're having a lot of writers at very low development, and I find that I don't get as much out of the class as I would if I was in a class with a lot of writers with a higher development. And the classes with that level of development, I can't get into because those are usually like MFA classes. So for me, finding a group of writers that is intermediate, so finding a group of writers that are 1 or 2 steps ahead of where I am, or even 4 or 5 steps at this point, And a group of writers that's supportive but also detailed has been really helpful for me. And that's one of the things I looked for when I first got to New Orleans. I've gone to 3 writers groups. One was a class at the library. I really enjoyed it, but I really didn't learn anything. I think I talked to you guys about that here. I just came away from a writers group that I'm definitely going to continue to attend, and I'm going to workshop my novel there. It may mean that I stay in New Orleans a little longer, but I will workshop my novel there. And the reason why is because these writers have a wonderful, they're very supportive, but they are past the point of coddling, and they really dig in and work with each other to try to improve the writing that they have. There's writers in there that are traditionally published. There are writers that are going for independently published. There are writers that have been in for a while, and new writers who are new but are extremely talented. And that is perfect for me. So when you're in a critique group, I was taught that when you are receiving critique, it's best not to respond. And the reason for that is you cannot digest the information that's coming in if you are thinking of how to respond or how to answer a question or how to defend your work. And the writing group that I chose is a little different in that the people do respond, and I found that a little bit awkward. That's one thing I don't like about the group. But they were fine with me not responding. And what I do instead of responding is I take notes. And so this is the part where I'm going to talk a little bit about how to get the most out of your writer group. Okay, so when you're talking about like a Just Write group, there really isn't much preparation. You bring your computer, you bring your notebook and a pen, and you just get writing. And it's really simple. But when you're talking about a critique group, there's a little bit more homework involved. So normally in a critique group, people submit their work. It might be 2,000, 3,000, 4,000 words, whatever. You submit your work, and then everyone reads their work on their own time and goes through and notes things that stand out to them, things that are different, things that maybe the person that wrote it may need work on. Now, if you're not a writing teacher, a lot of times you don't know how to do that. So what I did when I first started attending critique groups is I looked for certain things as I was reading, and I noted those things. And the people that received the critique, while not as detailed as my critiques are now, were able to get benefit out of them. So things that, as I read the work, I would make notes of any sentence, any area where I stopped reading and I wanted to go back. I would make notes of any section where I found myself yawning or I found myself bored. I would make notes of any section where I was reading and I totally got into it and I forgot that I was critiquing something. I would make note of anything that I read that I was like, oh, that's cool, or oh, that's amazing, because it's just as important to know what you're doing right as it is to know what you're doing wrong. A lot of people think that that's important just so that you don't feel torn down, but it's also important so that when you're revising, you know, don't touch this section because this section is really good, so that when you're revising, you don't start changing everything. Oh, New Orleans. So those are the... Sorry about that. So that was the easiest way for me to start critiquing other people's work. And then as I received critiques, my critiques naturally got more detailed. I learned what to look out for. I learned the jargon of writing. And so my critiques became more detailed, more helpful. I do recommend printing it out. I know some people like to just put their notes on the computer, but I find that when I am critiquing someone's work and it's on paper, I find myself doodling or making arrows or connecting words. And when I'm looking at it visually, sometimes I'll find that people have started the first 2 paragraphs with the exact same word, and it will look funny on the page, and I'll make a note of that. Whereas when I'm looking at it on the computer, I might not notice. So that's how I'd recommend starting critiquing if you're not used to critiquing. So when you're in the actual group and you're receiving the critique, Well, let me back up. If you're in the actual group and you're giving a critique, let's start there. So when you're giving a critique, I recommend starting with the overview. So when you read the piece, what was your main perception? Clarify any things that you were confused on. That's really good information for the writer to know if you were confused about what that piece was supposed to be doing or what a character is saying. Clarifications up front are really helpful. And then starting with the things that really stood out for you that were good. I like to start with something good and end with something good, because a lot of times we only remember the bad. They're not going to forget the bad. The stuff they need to work on, they're not going to forget it. It's written all over the paper. It's going to stick in their head. But remembering the things that are good help you as far as self-esteem, but also remind you that we're here to make this work better. As I told one of the people today, I told them, it was a nice group because when you left the group, you felt like, I'm capable of making this better, rather than feeling like I need to hang up my pen and my laptop because I'm the worst writer on the planet. And so by bookending your critique with something good and ending it with something good, it really helps develop that feeling in the writer of, okay, it has problems, but I can do this. I can totally tackle this. Now on the receiving end, when you're receiving a critique, first off, if it's a section that you have a specific question about, I recommend writing that in like a cover letter or in the top part in like a different font of the section that you submit. That way the reader knows, hey, in this scene, she's a little worried about point of view. Does it work? And they can look out for that as they're reading it for you. And so that's the first thing. The second thing is, I recommend taking a notebook and taking notes on everyone's reactions. Now, yes, most people are going to give you your paper back with notes, so you don't necessarily need to take notes, but sometimes things will be said that aren't necessarily on the paper. And also, I find that by taking notes as I'm listening to the critique helps me internalize the messages, helps me remember that I'm here to do work and that I don't have to defend my work. That's not what I'm here for. My writing isn't the worst thing on the planet. It helps me focus on each thing that the person is saying. But also, as I'm taking these notes and we're going around the table and I'm listening to everyone's critiques, if another person mentions the same thing that somebody else has mentioned, I will make a tick mark. So today, let me just start. I had a comment where the dialogue smoothed out after the first paragraph. The first paragraph needed a lot of work. So the first person said it. I wrote that down. It's a really important point. I wanted to make sure that I reinforced that, even though I'm sure it's going to be in the notes. But then 2 people later, they said the same thing. So I put a second mark. 3 people later, they said the same thing. I put a third mark. And the reason why is, if one person says something, it may be just their opinion. But if multiple people are pointing out the same problem, then I know that those are crucial things that I need to fix one way or another, whether I love it or not. And by taking notes as I write, I'm able to track who is saying the same things more than once. Because honestly, when I came back from Napa Valley and I had a stack like this of crit notes, it took me forever to figure out which ones were really crucial and which ones weren't. But I found that by listening and taking those notes as I go, at the end result of the critique is much more helpful. So that's something that I would definitely recommend. I would also recommend reminding yourself that you're there to do work. You're not there to receive praise. Praise is great, but praise isn't going to get your book any better. You're there to do work. And by taking notes, I find that it makes me feel more professional. It puts me in a much more professional state of mind. And it prevents me from defending my work, because my work isn't there to be defended. It's there to be made better. And so on that, the second thing I would recommend is, as you're receiving critiques, if you want to defend yourself, I recommend ignoring that voice. But if you have a question, write it down in your notebook. And then when each person is done with their particular comments, you can ask the question that their comments brought up for you. And that gives you enough time to to really think out, is this really a question I have, or do I just want to defend myself? And if it is really a question, a follow-up question to one of their comments, you've written it down, it's probably not in the notes, and then when you ask the question, you can write down their answer, and you'll have that on paper for you when you go back to revise your work. For me, finding a good critique group is really important at this stage in my writing. It's so important that the minute I left that group, and I thought to myself, this is a group where my novel will get better, but I'm only able to critique like 2,000 words a week. My first thought was, oh, I guess I'm going to have to stay in New Orleans for a while. It's going to probably take me more than 6 months to get through the entire novel. But I'm okay with that because I know my novel is going to get better, and by having it weekly, every single week I am cleaning up a scene or two before I go to the group. I am going to the critique, and then afterwards I am revising it, and then I'm putting it in the next draft folder. So this is really, really good work. I know for a fact that after going through this process for an entire book, if I give it to a developmental editor, it's going to be in much better condition than if I would have tried to do this work on my own. Quite frankly, I received the same level of critique that I received at the Napa Valley Writers Workshop, and I found that that workshop was so crucial to my writing development. Like, when I think of me as a newbie writer, there is before and after the Writers Workshop. It is like BC and AD to me because my writing changed that significantly. So the thought of being able to do that for an entire novel is like huge. So how do you find critique groups? You can try Facebook, searching for groups on Facebook. You can do general Google searches. But I find meetup.com. One moment. Told you. I find meetup.com is a great way to find different types of writing groups, and also you can kind of read the reviews and get a sense of what type of writing group it is. I also find that most coffee shops will have like a board or something, and you can look and see, are there any notices, are there any writers groups that are listed. Local colleges a lot of times will have like classes. Junior colleges are great for beginning writing classes, but also if you join a class at a community college, a lot of times the professors will also know of other groups in the area, so that when the class is over, you might have links to different types of groups in the area that maybe aren't on Meetup or maybe don't have their own website. So I hope this is helpful. I don't know. This were just my thoughts after coming in after this writer group. You know, I checked out 3 groups here before I found this one. I checked out multiple groups in where I was before, and I didn't find any that I really felt like I wanted to critique my entire book there. And so for me to find a group like this was like stepping into a diamond field and being surprised by all the diamonds. And so that is my video. I hope it helps. If you have any questions, leave them in the down bar. I think critique groups and writers groups and different types of writers groups is really interesting topic, and I would love to answer any questions you have in an additional video. On that note, ciao.